Hello. Is this on?
Yes.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Okay,
I can
good,
hear you.
Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon. Thank you very much for joining this webinar, Trade Policy Dialogue. Sorry for being late. We had some issues with some participants, so we trying to solve that problem, but we can start already. I think we should start. Thank you very much for joining. So good morning and good afternoon. Welcome to this Trade Policy Dialogue, Trade Preference Outlook 2025, Navigating in Times of Uncertainty. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Taisuke Ito. I'm the Chief of the Trading Systems Section at Trade Division of UNCTAD. I'm pleased to moderate this session today. This Trade Policy Dialogue is jointly organized by the Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific, ESCAP, and the UN Trade and Development, UNCTAD. So ESCAP and UNCTAD, we have been cooperating on this topic and for years, and we are delighted to continue with this collaboration this year as well on this important topic of trade preferences. Is that okay? Somebody, could you please mute the microphone? Okay, so we are talking about today the topic of trade preferences. This topic of trade preference is both old and new. It was over 50 years ago in 1971 that the general system of preferences were first implemented under the aegis of UNCTAD. It has provided lower tariffs in developed countries for exports of developing countries without the need to open their own market. And Asia, as a developing region, showcases numerous examples of how trade preference can lead to substantial export growth. Countries like Vietnam, Bangladesh, and Cambodia are the notable examples. However, today, the stability and predictability of non-reciprocal trade preferences have come under threat. Geopolitical tensions, economic fragmentation, and unilateral action have undermined trade predictability. Global policy uncertainty has curtailed export growth, particularly for countries reliant on preferential market access for their exports. Under these circumstances, how can non-reciprocal trade preference be strengthened to better serve the needs of the developing countries, particularly LDCs? How can developing countries, on their part, prepare for and mitigate any negative effects of preferential erosion and trade uncertainty on their economies? These are some of the questions we would like to address in today's session. So let me talk about on the housekeeping matters. So this session is organized as follows. First, UNCTAD, on our side, we will present the key findings of the new report, our new report, Trade Preference Outlook 2025, entitled Navigating in Times of Uncertainty to Set the Scene. Then we are going to move to discussions with our distinguished panel. The participants in the audience can pose their questions anytime during the session. So please do send your questions to us by using chat box. I think we will recommend rather use the chat box, please. With this note, let me first invite my colleagues. Yeah, sorry about that. So we are going to now, I would like to invite my colleague, Ms. Mezu Saigili, to take us through our new report on trade preference outlook. Then our director will, we are hoping that our director will join later. So at the moment, I think we can give the floor to them. So maybe Mezu, can you start your presentation, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Tai, for the introduction. Let me share. Good morning, everyone, by the way. My name is Mesut Saygılı. I am from UNCTAD, working in the trading system section with Tai. This is our joint report. So I would like to just present you our presentation. A second, I'm trying to see. Here we go. And is everything looks good? Okay.
Yeah.
This is our kind of a flagship report that we publish once every 2 years, and we have a good collaboration with SCAP. We presented the previous one again in a similar platform. So I will discuss last year's publication and some of the issues that we addressed. So the focus of this publication was different than the previous one because we had a very unusual year. So what we did was we wanted to see particularly some aspects that has been important for LDCs, like LDC graduation. But in addition, we wanted to also focus on some issues like the tariff increases starting from April 2025 by the US, and the estimated impact on that. So for both those cases, we did some simulations thanks to using TINA platform, again developed by SCAP and ECA in collaboration with. And then I will also finalize my presentation with the way forward, very briefly discuss about what can be done, what issues need to be discussed. First of all, already Tai mentioned how the origin of these preferences has started. So it goes back to the early 1970s when the countries needed to, especially developing countries, LDCs needed to some kind of policy support, especially in international trade, to integrate them. So currently, there are 25 programs available for these programs. And these programs actually account around 70% of the exports of LDCs. So actually, it's an important in terms of size, and for some countries, the impact has been also positive. Coming back to today, however, we see some kind of headwinds, some kind of developments that has been actually obscuring this development process. For example, uncertainty has been increasing. On the left-hand side, we see that uncertainty indicators has been increasing starting in 2025. And tariffs has been increasing as well, especially for manufactured products. These are actually creating some challenges for the LDCs. So the first part that we worked on was on the LDC graduation. I will basically discuss about how these 14 economies in the process of LDC graduation has potentially been impacted from this preference loss. In the region, in the Asia region, we have several of them are from are LDCs in the process, like Bangladesh, Cambodia, Laos, Nepal, Myanmar. So we wanted to see how the impact of losing preferences in 25 markets would have on their economies. We use TINA, as I mentioned earlier, a platform. It's a partial equilibrium model, and we saw if preferences lost in LDC specific preferences, and they will jump to either another GSP, general GSP, or they may move to MFN. For example, in the case of China preferences, it will be MFN. In the case of European Union, everything but arms, it will be a general. So results can be, is shown here, can be very significant for some LDCs in the region. For example, Bangladesh, we found as high as 32% of our exports could be actually declining. Some others are similarly, Myanmar and Cambodia, 17, 16%. These are quite significant amounts, 18 billion for Bangladesh, 46 billion for Myanmar, Cambodia. What we noticed from this graph is that some others actually estimated to have a less impact. For example, Nepal is much less. Solomon Islands are also much smaller. And also, we didn't show here, but Angola also has smaller impact. Then when we look at why these impacts are different across the countries in the region, we come up with some kind of pattern. That means the countries that are impacted the most are usually the one that really uses these preferences. That means these preference granting markets like EU, like Japan, like Canada or China, India are important. It's between 50 to 90% of their exports actually are going to those countries in the region. So that means kind of a dependence on these markets are important. However, this is not the whole story. We also identify countries like Nepal also important, but the impact seems to be less, at least the estimates are less. And also Angola, as I mentioned earlier, the impact is less. When we look at the why this is the case, we see that this highly dependent on particular programs may be important, and the availability of alternatives in the case of graduation is important. For example, for Bangladesh, Myanmar, Cambodia, especially EU markets are important, up to 77% for Bangladesh. But this is not the whole story. For some others, China is important. 4 of them, for example, China is the number 1, and India in some others. So we kind of did some bit deeper analysis for Bangladesh. The loss is actually 77% coming from EU market and actually coming from only 2 product categories, actually 1 product category and 2 different subcategories, which is apparel. Apparel is so important for Bangladesh exports that the 97% of the decline is because of losing EBA preferences, everything but ARM preferences on these products going to general GSP, which is not included. So that means high exposure to particular markets, GSP granting markets, and also product composition plays an important role. So moving forward, then why Nepal is less, we identify that the India market is important for Nepal, and Southeast Asia Free Trade Agreement is South Asian Free Trade Agreement is an important element for them, and already they have a trade deal with India, which actually in the case of in the case of GSP program, the FKF program, eligibility disappears. There's still an alternative program available. In the case of Angola, I mentioned the effect was less, is because they're the commodity exporter like fuel, and MFN rate on fuel is already low. So moving to MFN from preferential rate would have a less impact. So then what we understood from this exercise is that diversifying in new markets is important. One of them is maybe looking for FTAs. For example, Bangladesh has been already doing it with Japan and Korea just to ease the transition process. Solomon Islands already has a deal, as a good agreement with China, and also their main product, which is timber, is also MFN rate is low, but they're also seeking negotiating for an FTA. However, we want to caution that the FTA is not the same as the non-reciprocal trade preferences. In the non-reciprocal trade preferences, the beneficiary country doesn't need to open up their markets. However, in FTA, they need to negotiate and they need to open up the markets. That means there is some adjustment cost. There is some intense competition in certain sectors that they need to also consider, which is not the same, but it seems this is the area that needs to be carefully considered. Another area is not only the market, but also the product-wise. We wanted to highlight that goods is the one part of the story, but services has been the more dynamic part in terms of the global trade growth. It has become 27% of the world trade now. It has been growing faster than merchandise. Moreover, everywhere in the production process, the services are inputs. 71% of all the intermediate inputs actually include services. That means if you want to be competitive in a global sense, you need to have good services. This is the first part. Then moving to the second part about US tariffs, we also did some kind of analysis, also using TINA. As we all know, in April 2025, US imposed tariffs on almost every country in the world. So our analysis actually need to cover January to September. So it's the peak of the tariffs that we captured. So it's not today, it's kind of, there are some kind of tariffs moderated, but our analysis actually includes the initial peak. So I wanted to just showing that this is a bit kind of showing the initial shock. So what we found that across the board, the LDCs, the developing countries and developed countries, the tariffs has peaked, has increased. For LDCs, it's from 1.7 to 13.3 on average. However, this was much asymmetric. That means some faced much higher, especially manufactured good exporters like Myanmar, 50%, Laos, 38%, Bangladesh, 35%. Meanwhile, commodity exporters, it was milder, like 1 to 2 percentage point increase, like in Angola and Congo. However, this tariff is not only increased the cost for LDCs, but also it created inequality among the LDCs. So it's kind of violating the general or equal treatment of LDCs, which are structurally have a similar weak position. So this graph shows that the lowest tariff-facing LDCs vis-a-vis high tariff-facing LDCs from left to right, actually the gap between those two groups has widened. That it used to be only 5 percentage points, depending on what they export. It is now 20%. By September 2025. So it creates kind of an inequality among the LDCs, which are structurally weak economies in a similar level. And also I mentioned it asymmetrically, the weight has been heavier on the manufactured good exporters. Now the TINA results are these. We summarize the average tariff impact on the exports to the US of these economies and the total impact. We see that there's a disproportionately large trade impact. Even though there's a similar increase in LDCs and developing countries in general, the tariffs, but the impact at the final estimated to be much higher. It goes up to 45% of the trade exports to the US. Meanwhile, for developed, we estimated 25%. So why is the difference? Because their capacity to adjust to new tariffs are not the same. So LDC is in a more weak position to adjust to changing conditions, because maybe their exports are highly concentrated on few products, and maybe their products does not have the mode or the market power as the developed economies. So coming back to the final part of my presentation, what are the options now, given that now we are seeing the countries are losing their preferences, we are seeing tariffs are increasing abruptly, suddenly, and countries may lose their preferences because of certain conditions, and we have global trade uncertainty increasing, which is a factor, which is a negative factor for business investment FDI flows for the developing countries. Some of them are what we usually recommend for these programs to evolve in the future. For example, make them longer and predictable, the program extension. So if you give 1 or 2 year extension, is not that effective compared to if you give either indefinite, as long as they're LDC, or having a 10-year extension that gives predictability for receiving investments and integrating to trade networks, or expanding the product or country coverage in the programs, or LDC graduation support. So some programs are offering 3-year transition, but that's not the case in every program. So, and giving technical support so they can adjust, because that's also a financial element that needed. Or having an interim programs, like somewhere between general GSP and LDC only programs like GSP Plus. That's not the case everywhere. I mean, the EU, UK programs has it, but not all programs offer something similar. This is my last slide. So going forward, how we need to reshape the NRTPs, non-reciprocal trade preferences. Maybe South-South partnership is important. One element is now trade among global southern countries has been increasing faster than global trade. And we have certain programs that has been started much earlier, like GSTP, and also countries that are in a position, developing countries that are in a position to provide preferences for LDCs, that can be also one way to go, including RTAs. Another one is North-South FTAs. Now it is becoming more of a common element of the trade negotiations now. Northern countries are requesting more reciprocal trade agreements, but we need to emphasize that it needs to take into account developing countries, or especially LDC special conditions, as I earlier highlighted. That means the agreement needs to be development-oriented. And the last 2 points, FDI inflows, it has been slowing down in general, except the high-tech areas like AI-related technologies, data center-related investments, semiconductors. However, these are not these wouldn't be flowing to LDCs unless there are some incentives given to them. For example, outward FDI towards LDCs by major donor economies that could be considered or discussed. And finally, we need a dialogue to voice the developing countries' concerns as well. We don't have that platform. These preferences are basically voluntary. That means it's given by countries who are donor countries. And in some cases, maybe the voices of developing or the receiving countries, beneficiaries, are heard, but we don't have a really platform to discuss how we should change them, in which direction the change should go. In that sense, we need a platform. In the past, UNCTAD has played a role in terms of intermediating or providing a voice for different parts of the table. We need something like that for the future as well. And thank you very much. This is my short presentation. I hope I kept my presentation within the time limit. And thank you very much. If you have any questions, I will be happy to answer.
Thank you, Mezu. That was very concise and good presentation, I think. You presented well the contents of trade press, this our new publication. We had a just quick question from the chat. Do you just maybe if you can answer, maybe can you so one question is when you do the TINA simulation, I mean, does it suppose food preference utilization? I suppose yes, but do you know if it's supposed food preference utilization? And also, if you talk about the EU, I mean, after LDC graduation, does it assume countries moving to GSP plus or GSP? Those two quick questions. I mean, if you could answer, please. Otherwise, we can later discuss. Thank you.
Thank you, Tai. I mean, it's interesting questions. The way I understood, maybe Alexei is in a better position to answer than me, but I will just put my own interpretation. I think they use kind of elasticities to see how the trade would change. based on some estimates, and they use the Comtrade trade data, and that trade data is based on realized actual trade figures. I don't think it assumes the full utilization there. So it's a partial equilibrium model. So if the tariffs are reduced by this much, elasticity is that much, so you will see how much will the trade impact. I don't think it assumes full utilization there, but Alexei would be better positioned to answer that. And the second one, as far as I understood, when these programs also expired, GSP Plus is conditional, so it's not guaranteed. It doesn't assume automatically this GSP Plus is granted. So it's GSP General. So Alexei maybe again is a much better position to answer that. Thank you.
Well, great. Yeah, sure. Great. Thank you very much, Mizu. So maybe we'll come back to Alex afterwards. So Alex, thank you very much for your insight afterwards. So first of all, let me now move to our panel discussion. But before going there, our apologies because our two directors actually on our part, UNCTAD director from Ms. Lusmalia Mola, and also on this part, the SCAP, Mr. Rupa Chanda, couldn't make it because of some technical glitches. We are sorry about that, and then apologies for a bit of our technical issues. But I think we can proceed with our panel discussion, which is we are dealing with a quite interesting topic. Let me therefore now go to our panel discussion, and let me introduce our distinguished panel. Thank you very much for all your attendance and our excellent panel. We have excellent panel. So let me first introduce Mr. Mustafizur Rahman, if I may pronounce your name correctly. Mr. Rahman. Mr. Rahman is a distinguished fellow at the Center of Policy Dialogue in Bangladesh. Professor Rahman had previously taught at the University of Dhaka in Bangladesh, and his recent work has focused on Bangladesh's macro trade fiscal policies, SDG implementation, LDC graduation, and regional and global integration. So thank you very much for joining us. We are lucky to have you here. Next, we have Mr. Dikshya Singh. Ms. Singh is a researcher and policy analyst at the South Asia Watch on Trade, Economics and Environment, SOTI, based in Kathmandu, Nepal, where she has advanced policy dialogue on trade, private sector finance, agriculture, and climate change. We are lucky to have you here also, Ms. Singh. Thank you very much. And then thirdly, we have Mr. Yuta Watabe, who is a research fellow at the Institute of Developing Economies, IDE JETRO in Japan. His research spans international trade policy, environmental economics, and with a focus on quantitative trade models. Thank you very much. And last but not least, we have Mr. Alexei Kravchenko, who is an economic affairs officer at the Trade Policy and Facilitation section at ESCAP, and who is a very good colleague of ours. So his work revolves around the issue of trade and sustainable development, non-tariff measures, trade and climate change, and trade negotiations. And actually, he manages this, the famous platform TINA, Trade Insight and Negotiation Advisor, TINA, which is a very useful tool to allow us to estimate trade impact of trade negotiations and to provide a guidance to developing countries. So we are lucky to have you to first for you to maybe explain to us how these models are and organized, and what we can get out of this platform. Yeah. So thank you very much to all our distinguished panel to join us, and we are very pleased to have you with us, and we are very grateful for your presence. So let me maybe we can ask the same question to all of you, so that we can have a dialogue and a bit of a discussion. So I have two questions for you. My first question is, what are the trade effects of changes and uncertainty in preferential market access conditions for developing countries in Asia? So this is the impact of changes in market access conditions, especially with reference to this non-reciprocal trade preferences we just discussed. And also there's a great deal of uncertainty coming out of whole changes, arising from geopolitical tensions, unilateral policy actions, and fragmentation of global value chains. So how do you see the effects of those changes to trade of developing countries in Asia and LDCs? And secondly, how can trade preference, under these conditions, how can trade preferences be shaped to foster a more stable development path for developing countries and LDC? So how you can, how countries can try to build reshape trade preference programs and maybe reform their policies to better prepare for the to deal with this changing circumstances. Yeah, those are the two questions we thought we could discuss through this panel discussion. So so each panel has 8 minutes. We have a bit of time adjustment. I think it's good time to keep it for 8 minutes if you can. Thank you very much. And in the meantime, again, participants, you could send us questions through chat box to the panel. With this note, let me first invite Mr. Rahman, who I understand needs to be I could be a bit early in this session, but anyway, Mr. Rahman, it's good to start from you. So please, Mr. Rahman, floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator, and thank you, UNCTAD and SCAP, for giving me this opportunity. The report is excellent. I think it will be very useful for our countries as we strategize in view of our LDC graduation. The name of Bangladesh was mentioned a number of times. Obviously, Bangladesh has been one of the most critically benefited LDCs in view of the preferences. 80% of our exports enjoy preferential market access under 25 schemes, and Bangladesh has benefited significantly from this. We all know that Bangladesh is the second largest exporter of apparels globally, and Bangladesh benefited because generally the tariffs on apparels tend to be very high. So the preferential margin gives Bangladesh a lot of competitiveness edge over those countries which do not enjoy. And that's how Bangladesh became the second largest exporter of apparels globally. We also enjoy, for example, from the TRIPS waiver for pharmaceuticals. That is also another benefit. 97% of our medicine are domestically produced. We export $200 million worth to more than 120 countries globally. So all these benefits we have enjoyed over the last 50 years. Bangladesh became LDC member in 1975 December. So, but now we are on the verge of graduating, and obviously preference erosion will have significant impact. And the report, as Mesut has presented so brilliantly, clearly shows that we will lose preferences. Now, going forward, I think obviously we have designed our own smooth transition strategy, STS, but we need support for this. Bangladesh has applied to the UN General Secretary for 3 years extension of the graduation period, and that also speaks of the challenges that we think that we will face. It is good that European Union, Canada, UK, and some of the other preference granting countries have promised to extend for 3 years, but we think that we need about 6-7 years in order to gradually implement the STS, which has about 157 concrete actionable agendas, like single window, logistics policy implementation, backward linkage for pharmaceutical sectors, reducing the cost of doing business. But all these preparations will take a lot of time. And we are also graduating at a time, as Mesut has very rightly mentioned, and I saw for the first time the impacts of the reciprocal tariffs that US has imposed on us. And the distinction for Bangladesh and Cambodia is that we have also signed the agreement on reciprocal trade. For example, the additional duty on Bangladesh will be 19%. Now, already apparels face 15% MFN duty. So 15 plus 19, 34% duty on the when it will be exported to the US. Already we pay $1,220 million as duties. Over and above, there will be another almost $1,800 million. So almost $3 billion of duties will be there. On the other hand, the ART says that we have to reduce all our import items, tariffs on import items from the USA, 4,900 immediately and 2,200 over the next 5 to 10 years. So these asymmetric, deals which are being imposed on countries like ours, which are on the verge of graduating. So the timing is obviously very challenging for us. And so that's why, and all these bilateral preferences that Masood has mentioned, all these are, he rightly mentioned, it is bilateral preferential, unilateral preferential skill. It's not in the WTO. We couldn't get it in Hong Kong. We couldn't get it and subsequently also in the WTO. So all these we depend on the generosity of the partner countries, not as a global agreement. So, for example, EU is coming up with GSP Plus, but GSP Plus is only for 2/3 of the items. And also for apparels, Bangladesh will not be eligible for GSP Plus because it exceeds the 37% cap. And also the rules of origin is double stage. So I think that that GSP Plus is also, unless the EU changes this cap of 37%, will not be eligible. So I think, as Masood had mentioned, global dialogue, support for graduation, all these are becoming very important. And that's why the issue of deferment of the LDCs and gradually preparing for the LDC graduation becomes so important. So finally, Bangladesh is the test case. Is the 8 graduated LDCs till now has a population of 7 million. Bangladesh itself has a population of 175 million. It's the largest LDC which is going to graduate. We don't have any learning experience from other graduated LDCs. So global support and prepare towards implementation of our smooth transition strategy is so important. And that's why if we get some more additional time, I think that will be very helpful for us. And if we don't get those, Masood's presentation has shown what will be the impact, 32% fall in exports for Bangladesh. So I think that the issues are very clear, and global dialogues and support will be very important for sustainable graduation and making graduation irreversible. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Rahman. It was very insightful, kind of informative discussion on the state of play currently in Bangladesh in preparation for LDC graduation. Maybe it was so interesting. Yes, let me ask, maybe if we're interested in, because we saw through the study, Bangladesh may be one of the countries which will be heavily affected and most heavily affected by this the loss of preference, because you are so successful in exporting the other market. So your smooth transition strategy, what are the kind of focus of this smooth transition apart from the time? I know you have 3 years and so on.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. I will have to leave, but very shortly. Thank you very much. I think the STS has 5 pillars, 30 areas, and 157 concrete actionable agendas. Some I mentioned, for example, introduction of single window, implementation of the logistics policy, reducing the lead time at the port. So cost of doing business is becoming very important as we lose the preferences. For example, on apparels in EU, 12% duty. ESCAP study shows that if we reduce the cost of doing business from various through other measures, it's equivalent to about 13% of the cost. You see, that's how one can compensate. And that's what the STS is also talking about. And STS also talks about going aggressively for bilateral FTAs. We have done this economic partnership agreement with Japan. We are discussing with Singapore, with South Korea. We have already signed the partnership cooperation agreement PCA with EU, which is a precursor of bilateral FTA with EU. So I think that these are also preparing Bangladesh in order to go for aggressively for bilateral free trade agreements or SEPA or EPAs. So these are mentioned in the STS. But we, as Mesut has mentioned, it will take time. We have to prepare ourselves because these will be non-reciprocal and at best less than full reciprocity. So obviously, that's very challenging.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Rahman. That was very useful for us to know because we try to understand this situation. It's very useful. Thank you very much. I understood you have to leave, so maybe maybe next time maybe we can discuss more.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, thank you. I'll be losing a lot of insights, but sorry.
No. Thank you very much. Okay, so let us now turn to Miss Diksha Singh. Miss Singh, if you could you please take the floor, please? Thank you.
Yeah. So good afternoon, everybody. So first of all, let me thank the organizers for granting me this opportunity, especially at the moment that Nepal has decided to formally request for to make a formal request for a 3-year delay in graduation. So Nepal had met graduation criteria back in 2015, but the Gotha earthquake forced deferral. And we were not ready to graduate in 2018. So, but by 2021, Nepal's graduation was fixed. But at the time, due to COVID-19, Nepal was granted 5-year preparatory period against that's 2 more years than standard 3 years granted to graduating countries. But last year, September 2025, protests in Nepal, the large-scale protests, and which led to new government forming, and so it has resulted in damages, some of around worth 250, like it's almost $1 billion or so, and so it has also shattered confidence. So, and Nepal was so grey-listed in FATF also. So all these reasons, due to all these challenges, so Nepal is seeking for extension for next 3 years instead of this 2026 November. It wants to get graduated by 2029. So so when we discuss the trade impacts of preferential access, we need to understand that the losses are real, and so we do lots of simulations, but at the same time, it means the losses that those numbers they translate into livelihoods and losses for exporters and their workers, the loss of livelihoods. So the loss of duty-free, quota-free access is going to, so obviously it's going to translate into increased prices of Nepali export in the destination markets. So it means an additional burden for already a high-cost economy that is already hanging by a thread to remain competitive. So obviously, one of the most affected markets will be the EU, European Union. The EU is Nepal's 3rd largest market, although it only makes up around 3% of Nepal's trade. So this number alone reflects how little diversity is there in terms of markets for Nepal. So Nepal's preference utilization under everything but arms is almost 90%, and most of this utilization it's taken by textile and clothing sector. So ready-made products like ready-made garments, pashmina, cashmere shawls, carpets, etc. are the products that are benefiting the most. So losing this means Nepali products will be marginally expensive. So for a sector like ready-made garment, where a margin of $1 per piece also could make or break a deal for exporters. So this means losing preference means losing deals or losing orders. So And also like in the report as well, so there have been different simulation exercises to estimate the losses. So some it's estimated losses around 4 to 6% of the total exports. So this may not look devastating compared to the losses presented for other countries like Bangladesh. So, but the shock will be felt. And so recently, ILO, International Labour Organization, had done a study on Nepal's garment sector losses. So, what could be the impact of LC graduation on ready-made garment sector? And their projection is around 130,000 jobs will be losses. So there is going to be direct impact. So besides this loss of export, so potential export loss, there's another biggest threat is on it's created due to uncertainty. So which so uncertain because this uncertain. I think the report also highlights this that the uncertainty does as much damage right now as any actual tariff changes, because when the business community cannot predict whether preferences will hold, whether graduation will happen this year or in 2019, or whether GSP plus negotiations will succeed or stall, they will not invest. So we can already it is kind of reflected in the market itself, how things are here in Nepal. And at the same time, I would also like to bring some attention to a lack of private sector preparedness in case of Nepal. We at Saudi have done several research, farm level research in different sectors. So to understand how prepared our private sector these firms are with regard to what may come. So, and one of the common findings, glaring findings of each survey, each study was that the awareness of graduation and its potential impact on their businesses is really limited, and it is quite concerning. So we have found that they have no plan with regard to how to handle if orders dwindle after graduation or if their product prices goes up. Only few large exporters, they have actually like sizes of the firm also matter. So it's kind of obvious. So large exporters have only they say that they have communicated with their big buyers, like what are they going to do, and so small businesses, they are still clueless. So that is another huge concern. So with regard to second part, I think this preferences, how to shape preferences of what could be the a more stable development path. So first, I think in case of Nepal, most immediately the 3-year deferral itself, it makes sense because Nepal needs time. So what we have seen, but at the same time, let me be candid that uh, time is only valuable if it's used. So we were given a 5-year preparatory period after 2021, which is more than 3 years, usual 3 years. And so and we also have the smooth transition strategy, which was it was prepared in 2024, and but has remained, it seems that largely unimplemented. So it's said that we would negotiate free trade agreements with other countries, but as of today, there isn't even a framework for what Nepal is negotiating and what its negotiating position would look like. So deference is necessary, but it must come with a genuine and enforceable domestic action plan. So, because 3 more years of inaction would be worse than graduating unprepared. So, and another way is of course, because EU is the biggest market for the products that is going to be affected by graduation. So EU transition pathway has to be top policy priority. So we all, like all of the other graduating countries, we have set our sight on getting GSE plus status even before our EPA benefits expired. So, but it seems like GSP plus it is achievable, but it requires legislative and institutional reform, like getting those two remaining international conventions ratified, and that hasn't happened. And so we haven't seen like any progress regarding that. And private sector is kind of rigid about a lot of things, and things haven't moved in that direction. So, and also for the international community, and I think the cases of Nepal, Bangladesh, it kind of seems like that since these countries are integrated into international market, how international trade plays significant role in our economy. So graduation system itself seems that it requires a redesign. That how this graduation cliff, as we call it seems like a design flaw. So when a country goes from full duty-free access to facing around 8 to 10% tariffs on its most important exports within like 3-year window, and that definitely is not going to be smooth. So smooth transition does not does not seem viable in such cases. So maybe it would be better if graduation a ramp. So instead of cliff, there has to be a ramp like of 8 to 10 years with tariff exposure increasing gradually, like for certain like 1.5 percentage points per year, kind so that firms in the countries and the industries can uh, adapt to the changes than just rather than simply collapse. And most importantly, I think when it comes to it, so like we need to look inside our own domestic policies and how things are for each country. And so in case of Nepal, our different request and all that. So what has happened in the last 5 years in the preparative period, it seems that we need to like revisit what we are doing there. In Nepal, so Nepal is one of the highest. Nepal ranks as the highest logistics cost in South Asia, and our tax structure is also not kind of sort of taxes intermediate imports, and so when we have our own internal flaws, so no preference scheme in the world can overcome those constraints. So Nepal needs to treat graduation and instead of vying for deferred, but as it should be like a deadline of getting its own house in order. So uh, uh, yeah, and let me close with this that Nepal's story is like a cautionary tale about preference system. Like we have had preferences for over 50 years, and we have had preparation time. Yet we are asking for more time. That is because it's some are our own internal fault, but that is also because the linkage between preferential access and productive transportation was not made. So preferences gave us only market access, but didn't by themselves build us factories, train the workers, or lower the logistics cost. So that's a lesson that this preferential market access is a necessary enabler, but it's not it cannot achieve everything as envisioned as well. So yeah, that's it for now. Thanks.
Oh, great. Thank you very much, Ms. Singh. That was very interesting discussion. And actually, you raised the issue, brought up the issue of this, the ILO study and then the number of people affected. Those private sectors not, there's this uncertainty, created by, you never know,
Yeah.
duty-free, quota-free, if you can go to GSP plus. So that creates kind of uncertainty for not only policymakers, but also especially for the private sector. They cannot plan for the, that's future business. That's, I think, the very important dimension you brought up in this discussion, I think, yeah. But thank you very much for your insights on the situation in Nepal. That was very useful. And, okay, so let me now call upon Mr. Yuta Watabe from ID Jetro from Japan to share with us some analytical insights from your study on addressing those questions. Thank you, Mr. Watabe, please. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much for inviting me. I think this is an excellent place to talk about this topic. Also, I really like the report that is presented in the first presentation. I feel like I have a lot of overlap, so I may saying something redundant, but forgive me for that. Anyway, let me start with my own work on not necessarily the LDCs, but in general about tariff uncertainty. So I'm currently working on the impact of Trump 2.0 tariff, especially focusing on the uncertainty that have gave. So you see that the by announcing all these range of tariffs, that he not only created this tariff itself, but he actually opened up all the possibility that these tariffs are not necessarily so the current tariff is not necessarily guaranteed. It could actually get higher. And so I have this research on talking about that, the impact of that on investment. The rationale is simple, that if you're investing on trying to make a new factory, you really want to be sure what's going to happen to your market next year or even the next month. So by having this facing this tariff uncertainty, maybe basically a threat that Trump may increase tariff like next year or next month would hinder investment. And that's what we found in the model studies, that the some countries that the capital of investment reduces, not because the actual tariff goes up, but the countries or firms facing the possibility that the tariff would increase. So that's my own research. Let me get into some of the literature I know on this. So related to the LDC and GSP. So GSP has been widely studied, and it has been the GSP, or the preferential market access, is very fragile as a historical result. You see some example in the US that, or the EU, that they suddenly revoked or reformed the GSP system, that some goods or some countries just completely out in a surprise. And the effect is quite tough. Like in the simulation, I think the number was showing like 30%, but if you've seen the literature, it's actually pretty true. If you look at the historical event, the impact of the tariff increase due to the repeal of GSP is typically going like 5% to 30%. So the number is actually quite historically possible. Some interesting facts that I want to lay out. One is that even this is temporally, so US had some temporal halt of the GSP, but the effect have remained. And also the second point is that even the impact is larger if this GSP graduation is more of a surprise that happened in EU. So that's the literature on the LDC preferential market access, showing that this impact is actually quite strong. And the other related point that is pretty much related to uncertainty is that trade uncertainty or trade policy uncertainty itself is damning for trade itself. So I talked about my work on investment, but not only investment, but actually there's empirical evidence that trade policy uncertainty created trade export decrease. Actually, there's a historical paper on the historical US-China relationship, where before China joined WTO, that the US had this annual voting whether they want to continue low tariff against China, and if they fail to accept the vote, win the vote, what happens is that the US will increase the tariff quite a bit to China. And so there's an every year annual uncertainty, and the research exploited this fact and showed that once this uncertainty have resolved, so the U.S. have committed to lower the tariff to the current level, not going back to the higher one, then there's an export increase from China to the U.S., which is equivalent to about 5% tariff. So uncertainty itself is quite a big deal. The rationale is very similar to what I explained from the investment channel, is that if you're not sure if you can access to the market of the US, then Chinese exporters don't bother think about exporting, because exporting is a very long-term, heavy investment thing. You have to prepare to find the customers. You have to hire maybe translator or custom, I don't know, agent and stuff. So the whole uncertainty itself is really bad for the bilateral trade and investment and continued. So I think that's the question, the answer to the question. What's the impact of the changes and uncertainty of of LDC preferential market access. So the changes, the impact is big. Uncertainty itself is also a big impact. Then what should we do? That's the question too. I think the cliche would be that we need more commitment, right? We need more commitment from developed countries that these things will continue, or being at least much more transparent and solid. Like EU had this event that suddenly some things are gone, some countries are gone, and it has been a damning effect. So these things really should not happen. And I think we need some commitment on that. Related to that, that's something I want to raise here that I think we learned from Trump 2.0 is that unilateral tariffs are very fragile. Which means that if some country is just lowering tariff for you, then there's a lot of political pressure that will put that back. I think Trump showed that these commitment of the single country is potentially very prone to be repealed. I think in the contrast, what we see is that these bilateral trade treaties are much more powerful. Even the USMCA, the trade agreement between Mexico and Canada against US had a big role in lowering the tariff level from the US against Mexico and Canada because it's already codified. So even though Donald Trump may have a lot of power on change something, these treaties that is signed do have some power to stop some random changes coming from a political outcome. Right. So what I want to say is that these bilateral treaties are critically important to keep people in the same page. And that is maybe unsettling for some time, because I think that tells us that we need a lot of market opening from the LDC side. So to secure export, we need to secure import. That may be politically difficult, but I just want to say that is also could be a huge benefit from LDC countries, because importing is also a source of growth. Like importing a lot of good intermediate goods, good capital, machines is actually a solid source of growth that we see in a lot of countries, like including China and Japan. And so securing stable import is a flip side of a coin of securing stable export to other countries. So I think the lesson is that it shouldn't be unilateral, but we should really think about how we can build mutually beneficial bilateral trade treaty that involves substantial increase or market opening of the LDC markets. Okay, that's about it. Thank you so much for listening.
Well, thank you very much, Ms. Watanabe. That was very exciting discussion, and it's very good to know, your insights. And then, you brought the issue of the difference between uncertainty itself causing, trade damage, and also apart from the impact. Also, you raised an interesting topic of like a bilateral still, have some impact on the preventing or ensuring the commitments under the better than unilateral measures. Maybe we might be able to come back to that topic a little bit later. But thank you very much for your insights. Let me now invite next speakers. Last but not least, this is Mr. Alexei Kravchenko from the SCAP. Alexei, please take the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ito-san, and hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon. So without further ado, I wanted to show you the team that you may have heard about just now, talked about TINA. So part of the report was based on the result from this modeling, and I just wanted to show you how this modeling works, and as well as tell you some of the caveats that you should keep in mind when interpreting the results. So a little history. Originally, we built TINA way before ChatGPT and other agents were there, and this was our attempt at simplifying and automating tasks for trade negotiators. So the original idea was that if country A and country B want to negotiate a trade agreement, they need to do impact assessment, feasibility study, and so forth. And these are all time-consuming and data-extensive exercises, and countries with special needs usually have less experience and resources to conduct such sort of studies. So we created TINA to automate some of these processes, and then when we moved on to Bangladesh, and they at that time wanted to negotiate a free trade agreement with India. They asked us to examine this, and it didn't really work for the case of Bangladesh and India. Because what we try to do is we try to take the tariffs that Bangladesh faces when Bangladesh exports to India and lower it to zero as with any FTA, but didn't work because India was already giving low tariffs to Bangladesh because of LDC preferences that it was giving unilaterally. So we added a new module for LDC economies, which is removing those preferences. And I'll show you this in a second. But the idea was there is that running a partial equilibrium simulation of an FTA for an LDC economy did not really make sense with the current tariff data because they are already receiving preferences. And if you model going from 0 to 0, the result will be 0. There'll be no change. Whereas in the other way, and I'll show you here, and I'll take Nepal as an example. So we start with Nepal, the economy from whose perspective we would like to analyze the impact. By the way, you can access this online, tina.trade, and then in normal FTA negotiation, you would choose a trade partner, but here I will jump straight away into the preference loss simulation. So here you see the list of all the tariffs that are not MFN that Nepal is currently facing. And you see there's 51 preferential agreements. But I will very quickly just search for those that have title LDC in them as a proxy for LDC preferences. So we have here from Switzerland, EU, and so forth. So I will select these. And then I will run a simulation where I remove these unilateral tariffs and substitute them with the next lowest tariffs. Now, the next lowest tariffs can be MFN tariffs or perhaps another FTA if it's not an LDC related FTA. So we can see the impact here is rather large for Nepal. And if we scroll a little bit lower, you'll see the markets where this is going to be felt the most. So you can see India, EU, China, Japan, Canada have the biggest impact on the Nepal economy. So if we scroll a little bit lower, we'll see in fact what's happening here. So the current tariff, this is the SAFTA LDC tariffs that Nepal is facing when exporting these vegetable oils, this product, and it will be substituted by not MFN, but a preferential rate for Bhutan, Maldives, Nepal, Bangladesh. So this is a status quo sort of without doing anything, but still being able to take advantage of some of these preferential tariffs that are not MFN that already exist. So a little caveat here. This is a partial equilibrium model, and I don't have enough time to go into all the mathematical details here. But this should be interpreted as the first order impact assessment, because so this is essentially a model which is like Econ 101. When the price of the good increases, the quantity demanded decreases, right? So this is very short-term first order impact. But of course, if and we saw some of that with the U.S. Tariffs last year. You know, there will be second order effect. So the if the market is closed all of a sudden, especially in the major market, the imports are not just gonna the exports will not just drop to that country. They will also try to find a path to other countries. So that's trade deflection. And modeling that is actually surprisingly difficult, which is why we're not doing it here, because we've done quite a substantive literature review to try to find a way to show this. And it's not that straightforward because there's the pathway is not just the change in exports and imports altogether. So in some cases, for example, when we're talking about big massive increases, if we look pre LDC graduation example is pre US tariff administrations, but there were instances of big tariff jumps, and some of them, for example, are the US tariffs on whiteware like washing machines and dishwashers and stuff like that back from pre-COVID area, and we saw there that the exports from China to United States dropped as expected, and Tina would show to you. But what happened was, in that case, a lot of manufacturing has shifted to Vietnam, and with investment, and Vietnam started exporting these products to the United States. So that's one pathway. Another pathway was with steel and aluminium. So rather than changing the production entirely, some of the trade was rerouted to Mexico, going to the United States, and without bringing manufacturing or jobs. And then a little bit of manufacturing was introduced to comply with specific rules of origin requirements to still get preferential access to the U.S. market. In other products, the exports have dropped, and with no substitute markets, and essentially that kind of stayed. So modeling that is very much country of origin specific. It's very much product specific. And so these partial equilibriums should be understood with a grain of salt, understanding these are first order results. And then later on, you have to do a little bit more digging that is currently possible here to figure out what happened. So that's the partial equilibrium with LDC graduation. But I want to, with this conversation here so far was about tariffs and tariffs and tariffs. But there are other policy tools that could be very useful, particularly for LDC economies, to help with their smooth transition, delayed or not, that doesn't actually require negotiating tariffs. And I will give you an example. Let's say I want to, from the point of view of Nepal, negotiate a trade agreement, let's say with India. Why not? So, I mean, again, Tina works with tariffs, but very recently we added a new model, which is about trade facilitation. So if you click on trade facilitation, this will show you the results of trade facilitation measures implemented by both Nepal and India. This goes from the United Nations survey on global and sustainable trade facilitation. So this is a survey that we conduct every 2 years. It's a fact-based survey. We don't ask for an opinion. We contact focal points in each country, and they tell us which measures have been implemented or not, or partially implemented. And you can see Nepal's situation here for 2025. That's the latest year. And we can see not many cross-border paperless trade, not many of formalities. So you can see the results here for both Nepal and India. But the interesting part on top of this is that we added the trade facilitation simulation here. So on this page, we're able to simulate what would happen to bilateral trade if, for example, Nepal improved some of their trade facilitation implementation here. So this is based on a technical paper that we published together with ADB, and again, not much time to go into the details, but I'll just show you the results. So let's say e-single window currently partially implemented will be fully implemented in Nepal. E-submission of insurance, like all these things are partially implemented or not implemented. So all of these trade digitalization things, I will put them from Nepal to be fully implemented, and let's say fully implemented general trade facilitation. So whatever is not yet fully implemented, totally implemented for Nepal. I hope that's clear. And then I click simulate. So this will show the impact on exports from Nepal to India if Nepal decides to go ahead and implement all those trade facilitation. So the results are actually, if you think about it for a second, are quite striking. If Nepal goes with all the trade digitalization trade facilitation measures, the exports will increase from Nepal to India by 40%. This is bigger than you can get with any tariffs. In fact, you can't get this with tariffs to India now because Nepal already has a 0% tariff preferences under the existing LDC scheme. So you can't really push the tariffs anymore. So the lowest hanging fruit from the point of view of a way forward as a trade policy for LDCs is trade facilitation. But of course, you also don't want to have those tariffs increase on LDC graduations without securing the market access through RTAs with the biggest trade partners, which will be gradually withdrawing those preferences. So very quickly, because I don't have that much time, I just wanted to also show the legal TINA. So legal, because trade agreements are legal documents. So besides the simulator have here, we also have the legal TINA. And the point there is you start negotiating as part of your LDC graduation process. You want to examine what have your partners have put in their trade agreements in the past. So we tried to facilitate that, and we digitalized all the trade agreements that we could find, and it's an ongoing process. So if you're, for example, are interested in labor provisions, and you can search for labor in article chapter, and this will show you every time labor has been mentioned as a topic in all these trade agreements. So you can look at any of these agreements and see what does it have to do with labor. And you can also ask AI, which is pretty standard now, to explain you what this means. But also, if you, for example, considering just EU market, you can filter by the European Union and show you labor provisions just in the EU market. So you can search, you can look for them, but you can also compare them side by side now. So you can see EU Chile and EU Vietnam and all these agreements. You can read them side by side, and you can even highlight the similarities of contiguous text between two trade agreements. So TINA training is available to anyone. Just ask me or SCAP and ECA. It's a joint project now, but there's also online training that you can take to learn more about all the modeling and examples how to conduct it yourself. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alex. That was very useful presentation. I think we already had some comments from chat asking to organize a training session in Geneva for LDC group. So maybe you can consider about that possibility. I think that was can be useful for everyone, I think. Okay, so thank you very much for all the panelists. I think we don't have much time left. It's now 11:25, so I think. But thank you very much for your presentation and all your insights. I think we had received some questions, and also I think people had some questions and comments, and then I thought there was this issue of bilateral commitments vis-a-vis unilateral approach, because unilateralism entails a lot of uncertainty. So that is one of the key challenges, and in that context, maybe even if you want to do bilateral negotiations between LDC and other countries, maybe LDC may not have negotiating power, not like China vis-a-vis US. So that's another, I think, one dimension of the issues going forward, especially for LDC group countries, graduating LDCs. And also there was some questions also posed in the chat. There was the issue of regional integration. Some people are asking what can be the role of regional integration in to kind of address possible loss or changes in unilateral preferences. And also either if LDC graduation, for instance, can lead to developing regional value chain. And wonder if, in terms of also preparing for LDC graduation, how can we, I think one of the things we want to promote is maybe adding value to your products and then moving up the value ladder. So that how can construct that process, and what kind of role trade policy have in promoting the value addition and creating regional value chain. And also in reference to recent trends towards more increased bilateralism and regionalism, is this something to do with the weakening or eroding value of multilateralism? Because in the WTO there's a stallman, and there's discussion on WTO reform, but what can be the role of RTAs and so on. So I think those are some of the questions which were raised in this discussion. But I think now at this juncture, before concluding, I think we can, I would like to ask one, maybe each panel, just to say the last, concluding comment. If you want to address some of the comments that questions, that would be good. But otherwise, you can maybe wrap up your messages. That would be nice of you. So maybe can I start from Ms. Singh? If you can say a last word from your experience. Thank you very much.
Yeah. So with regard to regional, I want to touch upon the regional accumulation thing. So I think for GSP Plus, to be eligible for GSP Plus, regional accumulation will not work as much because those exporters need to satisfy double transformation rules of origin. So even if if regional accumulation is done in cases of ready-made garments. So earlier, I'm not sure how it is now. So earlier, in terms of South Asia, so regional EU was allowing regional accumulation. So, but for Nepal, so in case of Nepal, so if we are exporting fabric from India and getting it prepared in Nepal, and it was so it would satisfy regional accumulation for GSP. But after this India EU FTA, so that issue is not addressed in the FTA. So I'm not sure how it will be for countries like Nepal, which imports a lot of inputs from India. So along the side of, so when we're talking about this policy or trade policy uncertainty, so for countries like Nepal, which is quite dependent on its larger neighbor like India, so when India does its FTA with the EU, so which is dubbed as mother of all FTAs, so and it's getting like almost duty-free treatment. So it kind of for neighbors like Nepal, Bangladesh, it does erode preference that we were receiving. So it's not only about policy of destination countries and originating countries, it's also trade policy, how effective their neighbors are. That also erodes our preferences. So for smaller countries, they have to be always on their own toes to see what's happening, and at the same time they do not have negotiating capacity on their own. There's issues itself. So, and one of the areas that is going to be hit for LDCs after graduation is that UN support for this negotiation is going to be withdrawn. So it seems at face value, it seems like it's nothing but just some like travel cost for delegation, etc. That is not a huge deal, but for small countries with its own fiscal constraint, so that support means a lot. So it means if that support is withdrawn, it means there will be less people involved in negotiation processes. That is going to weaken their own stance somehow. So those things that look seeming, because a lot of attention is being captured by loss of preferences and rules of origin and all that. So we need to, and trips issues, but yeah, those small things also matter. So I think so what I want to stress is that, so what neighbors are doing also matter. And so at the same time, with the weakened negotiation capacity, it's going to be more difficult for LDCs. So the transition is not going to be smooth. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Ms. Singh. Let me now turn to Mr. Watabe, please.
Thank you so much. Since we are short of time, let me just go quick. I think the point was really I think the question someone came up was really nice about this bilateral negotiation. I think I should correct this a bit, because I agree that bilateral negotiation is inherently tough. You see the experience of like US Korea, that sometimes like the US really pushed hard, South Korea has to like compromise quite a bit. I think that's an episode that tells us that the naive bilateral negotiation is tough. I think the more clever strategy that people take now is like not necessarily regional, but like a multilateral negotiation, like CPTPP, RCEP has been quite effective. Not only that it covers a lot of countries, but able to kind of shield each country from being very pushed and have like unreasonable or I would say an asymmetric type of trade liberalization. So I think the key is to see how we can make a good group of countries that we can negotiate in a relatively fair way and being committed. I think being in a group is actually a very critical point that we should actually think about. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Ms. Bartlett. So last but not least, Alexei, please.
Yeah, thanks very much. I just wanted to also agree with Dr. Wathabia was saying, that Bangladesh in particular is looking not just to negotiate the bilateral trade agreements, but also join RCEP. Also, other countries have expressed their desire to join that, and so that's definitely one way forward. I also think that besides tariffs, countries are able to improve their graduation experience if they look beyond that. Trade facilitation is one, like I mentioned, but there's also non-tariff measures and procedural obstacles, which are often higher than their impact is more substantial than the tariffs alone. And previous research that we have conducted with UNCTAD actually shown that it's not really the non-tariff measures that are the issues most of the time, but it's the capacity of businesses and governments to deal with them at home. So you need to have the labs to conform with SBS requirements of your target markets. You need to make sure that all these procedures are digitalized and to basically help traders access their export markets. And that does not require trade agreements. That requires domestic reforms and also talking to the traders. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alex. That was very good summary of all the points that I think we should bear in mind in dealing with this topic. Well, thank you very much for all the panelists. I think we have come to the end of this session. Thank you very much for your presence, your insights, and sharing with us your experience and your analytical insights. That was very, very useful, and we are very most grateful for that. And also, I would like to thank all our audience participating from all the people from the audience. We had quite a number of people joining. That was very. We are very happy to have such a large audience, and thanks for all the interest and participation. So let me before concluding, I think we wanted to ask the quick survey voting. I mean, just the survey will now pop up the screen. So if all the participants, if in the audience, if you could, just vote your level of satisfaction of this webinar. Take you some seconds to show your, the evaluation about this seminar. But for the rest of the people, I think we can conclude this session. Thank you very much for your participation, and again, thanks very much for all our panelists. That was it was very, I think, useful, and for us it was we learned a lot, and from your insights and analytical experience. So I think we can conclude this session, and I think we'll come back to you for the next issue of our similar webinar. I think we try to organize, and yeah, I think we can conclude with this session. Sorry about this bit of technical glitches at the beginning, and then a bit of time, we take long. But I think that was useful to listen to all the discussion. Thank you very much, and I think we can adjourn the meeting. Thank you. Goodbye. See you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.